morning. This is, thank you. Thank you, Libby. Good morning. Welcome to our Board of Education work session special call meeting for Friday, December the 10th. May I have a motion to approve our agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The votes have it, 7-0. Mr. Holmes, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I sure will. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this time, I know that at our last meeting that we recognized the wonderful and great Bob Doyle. And I'd just like to have a moment of silence again this morning, just to just recognize him one last time. Thank you. At this time, our meeting today is regarding our presentation for Mr. Jim O'Rourke. He's an Assistant Legal Counsel for Superintendent Search of North Carolina State Board of Association. So we're just going to allow you, Mr. O'Rourke, to take over and let us know what you have for us this morning.
All right, well, good morning. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the board. It's a pleasure to be with you this morning. Certainly, we want to congratulate Dr. Brimley on his retirement. We regret the circumstances that bring us here today, but we're here to hopefully make it as smooth and easy a transition as possible for you, for your schools, and for your community. I do have a PowerPoint that I'll try to walk through pretty quickly this morning. I hope you will feel comfortable interrupting me at any time with any questions. And certainly if there are things that I haven't addressed throughout the presentation, I'm happy to answer questions and stick around at the end as well. And then depending on whether or not you plan on making any sort of decisions today, I'm happy to leave so you can have that conversation and don't feel like I'm standing over your shoulder as you decide what to do next. Again, my name is Jim O'Rourke. I'm one of 6 members of the Superintendent Search Team at the North Carolina School Boards Association. It's me, 2 other attorneys, and 3 support staff who you would have at your disposal to get you through this process. Over the course of about 20 or so years, our organization has helped 81 of 115 school districts in North Carolina. We've done over 180 total searches across the state, including for you all before. And we collaborate with our colleagues at other state associations across the country. So we've really honed a process that is intended to empower you as the elected decision makers in Moore County to make the best decision possible. We're here to get you good candidates, excellent candidates. We're here to get you good, reliable information about those candidates. Again, so you can make the best decision possible for your community and for your schools. So as I walk through the PowerPoint this morning, we'll talk about some of the framework that we have for that process, and then we'll also talk about some of the opportunities where you as a board have to customize the process to your needs to make sure, again, that you're getting the information that you need to make the best decision possible. So here we are, what we'll call step 1. These aren't too locked in, but this is where you've got a decision to make. The first decision you really have to make is whether or not you're going to conduct a search. And a search with us or even through your board attorney or another consultant can take several months. Our process can take up to 6 months from the time you really start having this conversation until that person shows up on day 1. And so during that 6-month period, if you need an interim superintendent, now would be the time to appoint one. You all have already taken that step. So now the next decision becomes if you're going to do a search and how and with whom you might do a search. The next thing that we would do after you've made that decision, if you decide to hire us, is we would come back with what we call our initial documents. And these are all the things that you need in order to get the search started. And I've provided, for example, a timeline. That's one of the first things that we would have you take a look at, application deadlines, kind of set out a framework for when interviews would be, things like that. We would also bring to you a customized vacancy announcement to advertise the position with information about your school system, your community. We would come to you with an application form. Certainly some of that is standard, contact information, education, employment history. But there's also an opportunity for you all to ask short answer and essay questions. You get some preliminary information from applicants so you can decide who it is that you want to bring in for interviews. So when we bring you those initial documents, we will come, you won't have a completely blank canvas to work with. We'll come with some templates to kind of help you hit the ground running. After that initial meeting, we'll begin the advertising period. This is generally 6 to 8 weeks, during which we reach out to potential applicants across the state and across the country. And I want to be very clear that although we only work with school boards in North Carolina, we conduct national outreach. We don't only recruit candidates from across the state of North Carolina. And so again, we will take that vacancy announcement and we'll advertise nationally. We'll get it out to other state associations, other state administrator associations, and we'll set up your online application. And then we will, this is what we do. So we have a pretty good idea of who in North Carolina is looking. We have a pretty good idea of who outside of North Carolina wants to come to North Carolina. We know where they want to be, so we'll engage in some recruitment that way. Certainly if there are candidates that you all individually know about or are interested in or have maybe seen at national conferences that you want to recruit specifically for this position, we would conduct that outreach on your behalf so that we would be the point of contact with those candidates so that there's no one member of the board that has access to some candidates but not to others. So we would be the central point of contact, and all the information that we get from applicants would go to the board as a whole. So if there is any direct recruitment that you all would like us to do, we would do it at that time as well. Now, during that period of time when we're collecting applications, it can be fairly quiet, and so this is when we encourage you to take advantage of the opportunity to solicit for staff and community input. And the way that we've primarily been doing this, particularly during the pandemic, has been through online surveys. So we'll come to you at that initial documents meeting with templates to help you get feedback from stakeholders. We do encourage you to solicit feedback separately from your community and staff so you can kind of see this is what your community wants you to look for in your next superintendent, and this is what your staff wants you to look for in your next superintendent. And sometimes there's a lot of alignment, and that's always good to see. But every now and then you start to see, well, hey, these are our staff's concerns, but these are our community's concerns, and maybe they aren't aligned. And so why is that, and who can help us kind of bridge that divide? In addition to online surveys, we will help you gather what we call organizational statements. That would be your Council of Churches, your PTAs, Chamber of Commerce, any other community organizations that might have an interest in providing information to you about what it is they think you should be looking for in your next superintendent. Certainly the board can also continue to solicit public comments at its regular board meetings during that time as well. We will take all of that feedback and bring it back to you and present it to you and your community at a public meeting so that you have all of that feedback, and then you can take that information and put together what we call a leadership profile. So those are those characteristics, experience, skills, things that you all are going to be looking for as you go through the process. You can tailor interview questions to that, presentation questions, references. You can use that as a screening tool, look at what types of experience different applicants have as you decide whether or not to move forward with them during the process. And we'll put that out there and share it not only with your community but with the applicants as well. As that process wraps up, the School Boards Association will compile all of the applications, and again, as the central point of contact, we will get all that information from the applicants, and we will share all of it with you. We do not screen any applicants. We do not make any recommendations about applicants. You will get all of the information from all of the candidates who apply for your position. We will continue to keep in contact with all of them. We will summarize as much of that information as we can in what we call an experience chart. So we'll let you know who's been a superintendent before, who's been an assistant superintendent, who's been in a central office, who's been a principal, who's been a teacher. So you kind of have that summary of their full career in public education. We'll also highlight who might have experience outside of education. So if you're interested in someone who might have a background in higher education, or someone with a background in business or running nonprofits, that will also be summarized there for you. So again, you'll get a good snapshot. So you don't just get a stack of 40 applications and start reading through them alphabetically. You can really be strategic about who it is you want to start with and go from there. We will also create a rating chart that you can use to screen those applications based on the leadership profile that you've collected. It's, basically gives you an opportunity to check boxes as you're reading through applications. Does this person have this experience? Do they have this characteristic? Do they have this skill? So again, as you're going through those applications, it's another opportunity to help kind of screen and weed down that initial pool. All of that information will be provided to you electronically on a secure and confidential website, so you don't have to worry about, I don't know if any of you were involved in some of the previous searches, but we used to ship boxes of application materials. So you don't have to worry about lugging around all of those hard copy files with you, full of confidential information. And again, you can really just hone in on those folks that you're most interested in reviewing. And again, I cannot stress enough how important this concept of confidentiality is throughout this process. Your best and most experienced applicants and candidates are going to want to keep their names confidential. They don't want their names out there. They don't want to risk their current employment and positions, and so you want them to feel comfortable putting their name in the hat and feeling like there won't be any sort of risk to them or their family by applying for this particular position.
So, Mr. O'Rourke, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
As we go through and do the online survey and board members provide their feedback and input on the qualifications and the different criteria that we're looking for a superintendent, and those things begin to be listed with the when the applications begin to come in, probably would be helpful if we could go through, or would your team be able to do that, go through and help us to drill down some of those main applications that we feel we're looking for versus going through every single one of them to where none of them have what we're looking for. So just helping us drill down to the application that we feel would match the criteria that we've developed, I guess is my question.
That's exactly what the experience chart is intended to do and what that rating chart will be intended to do. So what we would encourage you all to do, again, is we'll give you all the applications, all the materials that they submit with their applications, and we would encourage you individually to go through them and kind of identify, for each of you individually, who are your top candidates. We'll come back together, and really that's getting into this, you're one step ahead of me here. Well, the next step would be coming together as a board and then identifying as a board who are your top 7 to 10 candidates. And that's really, again, I made a point earlier to say we don't screen, we don't recommend applicants, but it's really at that point where we would say, hey, as a whole, here's someone that we feel like met the criteria that the board laid out in its leadership profile, or met the criteria that your community outlined, but wasn't, didn't show up on anyone's radar for some reason or another. And sometimes that can be, maybe they have all that experience, but there's something else, there's some other issue or some other reason you decided not to move forward with them, or it may be they just slipped through the cracks or something like that. So that's when we would come in and make sure that you aren't missing any rock stars or superstars that might be in your pool. Does that answer your question a little bit?
It does.
Okay.
I would like to make one other comment too. One of the benefits that we found before for using School Board Association is that they know most of probably all the superintendents in North Carolina, so they're able to give us some background information that may not be included in the application.
Yeah, we work with all the boards, and then that's where working with other state associations across the country. So it's not even, we can call our counterparts in Virginia or Tennessee or Georgia or Wisconsin and say, what do you know about so-and-so, and things like that. So anytime we have information like that, we will bring it to you as well. Yeah, so that next step is the board review. Again, we would encourage you to do that independently, and then we would come together and meet with the board to identify your semifinalists. Generally, we recommend about 7 to 10. We're not going to come with our own list. We're not going to tell you who you should move forward with or who you shouldn't. But again, if there are folks that we feel like would be a good fit but weren't identified by the board, we would identify them during that meeting and facilitate a discussion. And then after you have selected your semifinalists, the first thing that we're going to do is Google them. We're going to go do a social media and internet search and find out everything that we can about them. Because that's one of the first things that your community members might do or that your staff might do when you announce someone at the end of the process. And so we'll bring all of that information to you when you have your first round of interviews, so that if there's anything in their social media presence or on the internet and newspaper reporting, things like that, that you want to ask them about, you'll be able to have conversations with them. We'll also pull up recent achievement data from their current school systems, particularly if they're in a superintendent position or a central office position, to kind of let you know where their data is right now. And then from there will be your first round of interviews. And so we will take care of all the logistics, get those set up. We'll communicate with the candidates. We'll provide sample interview questions. Again, this is where you can really customize the conversation that you have with candidates at this phase. A lot of boards at this time will have what we call a presentation question. So maybe the interview will start with 15 minutes on analyzing Moore County's achievement data and talking about where the candidates see gaps and ideas that they have to close some of those, for example. And that's a really good snapshot to get an idea of what your board meetings might be like. Can they take a big question like that and get it done in 15 minutes? Or do they spend the full 90-minute interview going through that? So that's something that a lot of boards have found very helpful. And again, we don't come with like a predetermined set of questions. If there are things you want to ask about, we've got a sample database. You can write your own. You can make them candidate specific. I mean, we'll really work with you, again, to make sure that you're getting the information that you want from each candidate as they sit down with you during the interview process.
May I interrupt you 1 second?
Yes.
I want to back up to background checks. What kind of background checks are you talking about? Criminal background checks or work history background checks?
That first phase would just be social media and internet checks, and then school achievement data. The formal background check, criminal credit, all that we would do just for your finalists.
So roughly it's about $450 to do a criminal background check on somebody?
Yeah, education verification. They do sex offender registries, driver's license records. It's very comprehensive.
Okay.
Yep.
Thanks.
So initial interviews, and then so we will come with all the materials that you need. So again, we'll provide a lot of the logistical and administrative support to get you through that first round of interviews. During the interviews themselves, we'll be there. Again, the 3 primary consultants on the team are all licensed attorneys, so we'll be there to make sure that you comply with the open meetings law. We'll take minutes. We'll be part of the open session, but we won't sit in, excuse me, we won't sit in on the closed session interviews themselves. Those are a conversation between you and the candidate. We don't want the board looking to us for guidance on decision making, and we don't want the candidates looking to us as if we have a vote. Those interviews are just a conversation between you and the candidates. Again, we'll take minutes, and then after that first round of interviews, we'll facilitate a discussion of who you want to move forward with as a finalist. And we generally recommend at least 3 finalists. And as those finalists prepare for their next interview, this is when we would conduct a more extensive due diligence. So this is when we would call professional references. We let the candidates know who we want to call. We don't just call the folks that they've listed. Again, working with boards across the state and superintendents, we want to talk to their direct supervisors. We want to talk to their current board chair and vice chair, not just the folks that they have selected because they were former colleagues or something like that. So we're going to get good information from their current employers. And we generally go back about 5 years on that. So if it's someone who's bounced around, we're going to dig into that as well. We're going to find out why have they only been there for 2 years and the previous position for 2 years or something like that.
I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry.
When we get to finalists and selection of that, is that done in public or is that done in private? How much of this is done in public and how much of this is done in private?
So conversations like this all take place in public. But once you get down into specific candidates, interviews, discussions about the candidates, applications, things like that, that is all done in closed session. So, we will come to that initial meeting with all those documents. That will be open session. When we come with the survey results, that will all be open session. When we start talking about the applications, who you want to interview, who you want to be a finalist, doing the interviews themselves, and then your discussion about who your final selection, that would all be personnel information. That's all closed session.
Okay.
Okay, and just to be clear, out of an abundance of caution, the closed session portion, even if we have a quorum, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So we will, during this, back to the due diligence phase, again, professional references, this is where we do the more extensive criminal credit check. We actually contract with a third-party vendor that does those, and they do them for not only school executive searches, but business executive searches as well for across the country. So it's a really, really deep dive, criminal credit. They pull civil and criminal court cases from any county, based on last residence, things like that. So it's a really deep dive. And then we also get additional information from the finalists themselves. We'll ask them for their current salary information. We'll ask them for their current contract, extensions, renewals. We'll get performance evaluations, so you can compare their performance evaluations to their references and make sure those match up. If the evaluations are terrible, but the references are great, somebody's probably trying to get rid of somebody. And so we'll give you an opportunity to have all that information. We'll get all that information to you, so you can have that to take a look at. And then also, just in this day and age, things can change pretty quickly. So we'll update the internet and social media searches at that point as well, in case someone's had a buyout or a contract renewal or won an award, or there's been some controversy in their district that's blown up in between their interviews. From there, we'll go into that final round of interviews. We'll, again, take care of all the administrative and logistical details, get those scheduled, have, again, sample interview questions for you that you can choose from. You can write your own. Again, you can ask candidate-specific questions at this point if you would like. We'll bring all those materials for you and make that as seamless as possible. Just like in the first round, we'll participate in ensuring that you are complying with the open meetings law, taking minutes, things like that. We'll participate in any conversations that you have about those additional due diligence materials that you provided. So when you get those background checks, because they are so detailed, they can be overwhelming. And so we'll walk you through what it says and, what might be a red flag versus everybody has a speeding ticket kind of thing. Let you know what kinds of things to be worried about. And then we can also kind of walk you through those evaluations and references and say, hey, this is something you should be aware of, or this is something you might want to ask about. And those conversations continue right up until each interview starts. So you may have your script of questions, but as you start talking about these individual finalists, there may be something right before the interview starts that you say, hey, this is something we need to dig into. And so again, we'll work with you to help identify that and keep the process moving. After that second round of interviews, you'll have a discussion about who it is that you would like to move forward with and who you'd like to make an offer to. And it's really at that point that you would bring in your board attorney. We're not here to replace your board attorney, but he or she, I think it's Neil, is it Mr. Rainey, would step in and take over the negotiations, so, and represent you and the candidate. And so that allows us to kind of step back and be a good kind of intermediary and just say, negotiate in good faith. You want to make this happen. They want to make this happen. And we can kind of talk both sides through that process without being directly involved in the negotiations. So we try to help where we can there. And then from there, we would help you with the announcement and selection process. And so this is where we completely disappear and step back and let you all have a nice public meeting to welcome and announce your new superintendent, introduce him or her to your staff and to your community, and we'll help you draft a press release at that point, put together all the minutes from all the meetings that we've attended, and then provide whatever other support is needed as you move forward at that point. So that's maybe what felt to me like a very quick overview. Hopefully it wasn't too painstaking for you all. I just will say that we do hope that you will consider using the School Boards Association. We're very proud of the experience that we've had. We've done a number of these across the state. We're currently working with Elizabeth City. We are talking to a few other boards currently, and we anticipate some more decisions about those searches in the next couple of weeks. So I would anticipate we have 3 or 4 overall going into the spring. And so for you all, without making you feel too rushed, but to stay kind of at the front end would certainly give you an advantage in terms of recruitment and things like that. So that's something to think about. I think with the interim that you have in place, you're generally looking at a July 1 start date anyway. So I think you have enough time to kind of get started, but also to kind of not feel rushed as you go through the process during the spring.
I'm sorry, Jim, just to clarify, when you said a 1 July start date, were you implying a 1 July start date for a new superintendent, or were you, that was
For the
undefined?
for a new superintendent or if your interim were to continue.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so the way that the superintendent contracts work is they have to end on June 30, and so if you bring in a new superintendent, and they're limited to 4 years, so a lot of folks don't want to start May 1 or June 1, because then instead of getting that full 4th year, they get 2 months and 3 years. So a lot of them like to start July 1.
Yeah, and that actually answered one of the questions I jotted down. It was, when is the best time to conduct a search? What's the best timing, and when do most superintendents like to start? So you answered the second half of that.
Okay.
Right, 1 July is when most of them like to start.
Yeah, I think
Good
just
time to
from
move
a
around.
contract structuring standpoint.
Yeah, but
And ending a school year as well. I mean, a lot of, especially sitting or experienced superintendents don't like to leave in the middle of a school year, or
Right.
especially so close to the end of a school year.
yeah, there's not a lot of time to go through this process, and then, give a person has to move, and, there's a lead time to that. So anyway,
And some of them will have 30 or 60, and I've even seen up to 90-day notice requirements to leave their current position. Usually at that point, the candidates board is willing to negotiate that because they want to move forward with the transition on their end as well. So they, if you get started early in 2022, you shouldn't have any problems getting someone July 1. And the other thing I just want to highlight too is the last thing in bold here, but as the State School Boards Association, we're here for you whether or not you hire us to do a search, and we're here for you long after the search concludes. We're here to support you, your new superintendent, as best we can. We're right down the road, as I found out today. It's a beautiful drive, and we're here to help you with the transition past July 1, if that's when you have someone starting. So I'm happy to answer any other questions that the board might have about our process or about searches in general.
Thank you for your information this morning. Board members, what questions or comments do you have?
I have a comment. Just it's a big process, and to do this on our own would be very overwhelming. So I appreciate all the deep dive information that you will do on getting a superintendent. It's very overwhelming. Like, if I was thinking, if I had to do all of this, or we had to do all of this, we'd be sitting in this boardroom for lots of weeks on end. So I support going in, having you help us with this search.
A question, back to your stakeholder input, when you're conducting that 4 to 6 weeks of gathering information. I know we've become an online society. But do you ever recommend, and you mentioned on here on slide 5, that you also suggest public comments at board meetings, but do you ever recommend that we just, instead of separating that part from a board meeting, because we have other speakers coming in regularly, to hold a possible special meeting or a public forum meeting, whatever, in addition to comment at the board meeting?
Yeah, that's definitely something we were doing a lot more before March 2022. We haven't seen as much, or 2020. We haven't seen as much of that since COVID, but if you all have the space and the capacity to do that, we've seen districts that will do like a forum, even just on Zoom or something. If you have the capacity to do that, that's something we can help you with as well. And so that's not unheard of. We just haven't, just the nature, it's just the world we're living in right now. We haven't seen as much of that, but we are prepared to help you with that if that's something that you want to do.
Mr.
Pam, I'll just make, I've been through 2 superintendent searches with the School Boards Association, and I guarantee you they're very thorough. You'll find out everything there is to know about all the candidates. And the questioning too, we have some pointed questions during the interview process. And it's fairly easy, after all the information we get with the stakeholder input, to fairly easy to determine at least the few that you really want to consider seriously.
Do you come with any kind of guarantee? You guarantee us X number of applicants,
Any
or
returns?
You guarantee people are going to get along.
Can you guarantee the board gets along?
Well, what I will say is that, we've seen generally between 20 and 40 applications. It's just kind of been this ebb and flow. It's been a weird time. North Carolina has done pretty well in the last 18 months, that a lot of superintendents have really kind of stayed put. There hasn't been a lot of turnover, so I think that there are folks out there who are interested in looking and have been sort of waiting in the wings because there haven't been a whole lot of vacancies. So I think you will, and this is a great school system. It's a great place to live. And so I think you will have a very competitive pool. So that's as close as I can get to any sort of guarantee. And then, like I said, we, and maybe piggybacking on what Mr. Dennison said, but I think you will, if you get 20 to 40, there are going to be some that you maybe screen out immediately, but you should have a very, a good choice among that maybe top 10 or 12. And then I think, the hard part gets when you're down to those 2 or 3. And hopefully you feel like it's a struggle to choose among those top 2 or 3. And we have generally found that to be the case. But there might be one that just absolutely rises to the top. And so that's where all this information comes in. And that's where having us to kind of step back and help kind of facilitate that conversation comes in. Because we can kind of see where the consensus might be, or, where you all are kind of rallying, or maybe here's more of a compromise candidate, something like that.
And just to add to, we've had internal candidates for both too.
And one thing, you said that you as an association have worked with about 80 of the LEAs?
81.
Yeah.
81 of the LEAs, and they're what, 110? So you guys are far and above the preferred group to do the searches by the number of LEAs. That's what seems to me to be. So I very much appreciate your presentation, because I think we do need someone who will do this. And seems like if we're a member of the North Carolina School Boards Association, looks like it's something that we can get some mileage out of. So I think it's a good idea.
Any other questions? Mr. Hensley?
So I had not read any of the material. I assume, was this brief posted online? It was. It was. Okay. Well, I had not seen the brief. I've been traveling until today, and I have to say, as I was, I've been skeptical, right, without seeing your materials, but now I'm sold. Okay, so that's quite. Anyway, the second thing I would say is, and then I have 2 questions. My second observation is, I have always said that there is an association for everything on the planet, and everyone will always come up with an acronym. And on your second slide, where there is a national there is a National Association of Superintendent Searchers.
Yeah.
Validated my theory that there's an organization for everything, regardless of how obscure, and then it even has its own acronym of
Yeah.
NAS. So, okay, now on to
An
two.
annual conference on top of that. They
Yeah, and it's in Hawaii or, you know,
it was
some.
in Indianapolis this
Waikiki.
last year.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, if you really want to get work done, you have your conference in Dayton, Ohio. So anyway, so here's my two questions. One is, you know, you talked about surveying the stakeholders and parents and stuff. Do you guys have recommended survey questions?
Yeah, so we will come to that initial meeting. We have 2 templates that we really recommend, and it just kind of depends on what your preference is. I will say they're pretty structured, but both versions of the survey have an open response box, so that if there's something on the survey that someone wants to communicate, or excuse me, if something isn't on the survey that someone wants to communicate, they can fill it in that comment box, and the board will get all of those comments. We will not filter them, redact them, or anything like that. We will redact confidential student and personnel information before we make those comments available to the public, but we will not redact any of that information that goes to the board. So anything that anyone types into that survey will come directly to the board, so you will get all of that feedback.
So are there, and I assume this will be part of the process, but off the top of your head, do you know what the most important factors are to ensure a good match? I mean, is it background, cultural match?
I think it's probably different for every board and every community. And I think that we've found that in doing these searches, that we go in thinking the board's going to go one direction and they go somewhere completely different. And then sometimes we see that the criteria that the board has outlined in its leadership profile isn't ultimately the criteria that wins the day once you're sitting down across from candidates and really digging into their background. I mean, sometimes you think you want someone to keep the ship steady straight ahead, and you come out of the interview process taking a hard turn in the other direction because someone comes in with new ideas and is an exciting, innovative leader, and it's just not what you thought you were looking for at the beginning. So I'd hesitate to make any sort of predictions about what would be a good fit here compared to any other district.
Yeah, and again, Chair Thompson, I'm sold, you know, and assuming that, you know, the other board members concur, but, you know, I would say we've got some procedural issues to work out, but other than that, I think this is a good process. They obviously are experts. If you were filtering information, I'm saying filtering applications and stuff, I'd feel much different, but the fact that you guys just pass everything through with you get the information, you assess it, and then you provide it to us unfiltered with your assessment, and that's good.
Any other comments, questions?
So procedurally, do we let it be known that it's the consensus of the board to allow our current superintendent and our attorney to enter into a contract or to negotiate a contract for presentation to the board at the next available time? I don't know if they can do it by Monday, that's pretty quick.
Yeah.
But maybe we need a special meeting, I don't know.
Yeah.
But,
Before we get to that point,
Yeah.
Mr. Levy, let me ask a question
Yeah.
regarding our next steps. I just want to confirm, from what we're reading as far as our fees, that this process will be $21,500 plus the additional expenses that's listed.
Yeah, as approved by the board. So there was another handout in the folder or in your materials. And so these are just some examples. So you could do more or less advertising. Again, if you do your first round virtually, you wouldn't need meeting space or meals, things like that. If you have more finalists, the background check expense might go up. But these are just some samples, but we generally find that it's somewhere in the range of $3,000 to $5,000 in expenses.
Okay, all right.
On top of that flat fee.
Okay, just wanted to confirm that what we were reading is in fact true. Okay, and back to your point, Mr. Levy, and board members, how do you feel? Should we add an agenda item to our Monday meeting, let's go ahead and proceed to add this for approval of, contract for next steps.
Yeah.
I would agree,
Is
yes.
everybody in consensus? I think, the sooner that we get this started, the better we'll be. And trying to set up a special call meeting, I don't think is necessary. Something as important as this position is, for our school system, and for our community, obviously, all board members will be included, with step one to the final step. I know at some point we'll do some ad hoc, as Mr. Hensley pointed out, with special members, but, everybody will be involved with the process all the way through to the final, recommendation, so.
Yeah, Pam, I would just suggest too, so the public knows, instead of us just voting on what we're gonna do, if Jim could work it out or somebody, that we could get his 15-minute presentation.
Oh, absolutely. And I don't know if that's too soon for you for Monday night, Jim, and that was gonna be my other question. Would you be the individual, or is someone else would be appointed?
It's either gonna be me or my colleague Sam
Okay.
Thorpe.
Okay,
So we're
okay.
gonna kind of be juggling.
Tag team, okay,
Yep.
okay.
So you want someone Monday night?
Monday night would be great if we could get it. If you'll check and just send, myself and Ms. Potter.
Okay.
If you could send us an email.
I think that should be fine.
And just let us know, confirm that, and then, Ms. Potter, as you get that, if you could just, add that to our agenda, for,
But Madam Chair, in the meantime, we do have to run, before we vote on a contract, we're gonna have to run that contract
Yeah.
by our lawyer.
absolutely.
So, maybe, either you or a gentleman here can contact, our attorney, Mr. Ramey, and they can have those technical discussions, which will be presented to us. Hopefully Monday. It would be a good idea if we could do it on Monday.
Okay,
But I don't want to super rush things and just get something haphazard. I'd like a good, solid contract.
okay.
And to Mr. Levy's point, today's Friday, yeah, sorry, caught the red eye back.
I know.
Yeah, today, okay, today is, yeah,
Trying to
Friday.
figure out the
Is
day
it
and
Christmas?
time.
Today's Friday and the meeting's Monday, right?
Yeah.
So there's no problem adding it to the agenda. My expectation, what would be perfect, and I think what the chair was asking for, is to have a proposed contract that we would approve and ratify. So my comment is, unless the contract is half a page, if it's longer than half a page, we need to get it, Monday morning, so that at the latest Monday, mid-morning, so that we have a chance to review it. Because really all we're going to do, I think at that point, we might have a few cleanup questions, but really it's approval of the contract. So,
Right.
just answering
Yeah, so
any questions we'd have.
And Jim,
We have
you
just
may
a
already
standard
have one.
consulting agreement that I can probably even get someone from the office to send after I leave here.
Mm-hmm.
And it just outlines
Be
the fee, the
straightforward.
basic steps that we've said, and then,
Yeah.
I mean, everything's customized. So there isn't hasn't traditionally been a whole lot of negotiation or any issues, but we'll get it to you as soon as
Yeah.
possible. You can look at it.
The
And if
key,
you're comfortable voting Monday night, great. If not, we're happy to answer additional questions or let your attorney take a closer look or whatever.
the key is to get it to Mr. Ramey.
Yeah,
Will do.
Because, and then when Mr. Ramey's finished with it, he'll get it to us. But if you can get it to Mr. Ramey and have because I don't even know what his schedule is,
Right,
whether
right.
he may be gone for the weekend for all I know.
so, board members, and follow up of what, Mr. Levy has said, would you prefer that, when Mr. Rourke's team send the contract, to just send it to all board members so that you can take a look at it along with Mr. Ramey? Or would you prefer Mr. Ramey looking at it and then, okay, so that's what,
I would disagree with Bob on this because, again, I think it's a straightforward, simple contract. So I would prefer concurrent.
Okay.
If Jim or whoever sends it out to Mr. Ramey and, us concurrently, we can review it because I don't expect Mr. Ramey to make many changes if they've used the same agreement in dozens of school districts. And then, but Bob, to your point,
Yeah.
ultimately, we're gonna rely on the advice
Mr.
of the attorney.
Oh, that's
yeah.
fine. It kind of doesn't matter to me one way or another. My whole thing is, I just want Mr. Ramey to come back to us and say, this is the contract that
Okay.
I believe you should sign. He's not gonna recommend that we go with the School Boards Association. That's our decision. But if we decide, and it looks like we're going to decide, to go with the School Boards Association, this is the contract that we should sign.
Okay.
And
All right,
I don't know if that's something he could cover. We could ask our questions in closed session. I don't know if that's be a closed session item,
Okay. I can follow up and let everybody know.
but we could have questions answered before the meeting.
Okay.
I was just gonna mention too that, that presentation's already available. Are we gonna have him explain it again, even though we had a special meeting on Monday?
15-minute version.
I think it would be helpful, as we do with other presentations, to where we just have a moment to go back through.
That's fine.
Obviously, it won't be to the detail that we have heard and talked about today, but just a very high level of the presentation. Somebody may have a thought over the weekend that they did not get answered or asked today. So just high level, not a lot of your time on Monday, just to give us an opportunity to revisit and then just vote on it.
And then the
I think it's
public-
important the public know
Yes.
what we're going to be
Yeah.
voting on.
Yeah.
We're happy to do that. yeah.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Mr. O'Rourke, we appreciate you taking the time to meet with us today. It has been extremely helpful to know that we have someone with your background and expertise that can do all the groundwork, legwork for us, and then just bring us back the goods, so to speak. So thank you, and we look forward to hearing back from you with the contract and working with you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
All right. Any other board comments at this time? Mr.
The only comment I have, and I'm sure the fellow board members share it, is, we have 100% confidence in Dr. Locklear being the interim superintendent. I just want to reiterate that.
Thank you, Mr. Hensley. Any other board comments? Let's see, I want you guys to look at our time.
Madam Chair, I move to adjourn.
I want everybody to
This has been the shortest, best
Dave
meeting
made
ever.
the motion, I seconded it.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Please.
No.